For 37 years, I washed their dishes, scrubbed their floors, and laundered their clothes. I cooked their meals, tended their garden, and dusted their precious family heirlooms with a gentleness they never showed me. I was Sarah Jensen, the woman who married their precious son Robert. But to them, I was never family. I was the help. Sarah, you missed a spot. My mother-in-law Vivian's voice cut through the quiet afternoon as I polished the silver tea set that had been in the family for generations. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed to an invisible smudge while her other hand clutched her pearl necklace, as if protecting it from my unworthy touch. I'm sorry, Vivian. I wiped the spot again, fighting the urge to tell her I had already cleaned it 3 times. At 63, I still found myself apologizing to this woman who had made it her life's mission to remind me I wasn't good enough for her son. Robert and I had married when we were both 26. He was the brilliant architect from the prestigious Jensen family, and I was the daughter of a seamstress and a mechanic, a fact Vivian never let me forget. When we bought our first small house, his parents insisted on helping with the down payment, though I later discovered it was just a ploy to maintain control over our lives. 6 months into our marriage, Robert's father Harold suffered a mild stroke. That was when everything changed. "We can't leave them alone, Sarah," Robert had pleaded, his eyes filled with the guilt only a dutiful son could feel. "They need us, just for a few months until Dad recovers." Those few months turned into years. We sold our little starter home, the only place that had ever felt truly mine, and moved into the sprawling Jensen family estate. A Victorian mansion with 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and more antiques than a museum. The house where I would spend the next 3 decades of my life serving a family that saw me as nothing more than the woman who had trapped their son. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that Robert and I would eventually move back out, start the family we had dreamed of, build the life we had planned. But Harold's health issues became a convenient excuse, and somewhere along the way, Robert stopped talking about leaving. The family business needed him close by. His parents needed our care. There was always a reason, and I was always expected to understand. We did have one child, our son Daniel, the only bright spot in that massive, oppressive house. But even he grew distant as the years passed, shaped by his grandparents' influence and his father's increasing absence. Robert threw himself into the family architecture firm, working longer hours, taking more business trips, leaving me alone, with his parents more often. "You know, your problem is that you lack refinement," Vivian would tell me as I prepared dinner. "Robert deserves a woman who understands his world." After years of these comments, I'd stopped defending myself. What was the point? In their eyes, I would always be the gold digger who had somehow tricked their brilliant son into marriage. Never mind that I had given up my own dreams of opening a small bakery, that I had sacrificed every ambition at the altar of the Jensen family name. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Harold was 87 now, confined to a wheelchair, but still sharp as a tack when it came to criticizing my housekeeping. Vivian, at 84, moved slower, but had lost none of her cutting precision when it came to finding fault in everything. I did. I was in the kitchen preparing Harold's special low-sodium lunch when I heard the crash from upstairs. "Vivian?" I called out, wiping my hands on my apron as I rushed toward the stairs. "Vivian, are you all right?" No answer, just the muffled sound of distress. I found her in the master bedroom, surrounded by scattered papers, an overturned filing box at her feet. Her face was ashen, her hands trembling as she clutched what looked like an old document. What happened? "Are you hurt?" I knelt beside her, scanning her for injuries. "Get away from me," she hissed, trying to gather the papers, but her arthritic fingers couldn't move fast enough. "This is private family business." Something in her panic made me pause. In all our years together, I'd never seen Vivian rattled like this. She was always composed, always in control. Whatever had spilled from that box had shaken her to her core. "Let me help you up at least," I offered, reaching for her arm. She jerked away with surprising strength. I said, "Leave it. Go check on Harold. He's probably waiting for his lunch." I should have listened. I should have walked away as I had thousands of times before when dismissed from family matters. But something, perhaps decades of suppressed defiance, made me reach for one of the papers that had slid near my foot. It was a deed, a property deed for the very house we were standing in. My eyes scanned the document, expecting to see the Jensen family name, but instead, I froze at what was written there. Owner, Sarah Elizabeth Jensen. This can't be right, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. Vivian snatched the paper from my hands, her face twisted with a mixture of rage and fear. You were never supposed to see this. None of this concerns you. But it did concern me. According to that document, this house, this prison that had held me for nearly 4 decades, was in my name. Not Robert's, not his parents. Mine. How long? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. How long has the house been in my name? Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line as she shoved the papers back into the box. Robert will explain when he gets home. Now, I believe my husband is waiting for his lunch. Her voice had recovered its usual imperious tone, but her hands still shook. I rose to my feet, suddenly feeling taller than I had in years. Yes, I'm sure he will explain. I'm very interested to hear what he has to say. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I served Harold his lunch, listening to his complaints about the soup being too cold and the bread too hard with a detachment I'd never felt before. My mind was racing, piecing together fragments of conversations from over the years, trying to make sense of what I'd discovered. When Robert's car finally pulled into the driveway at 6:30, I was waiting in the foyer. No dinner on the table, no freshly ironed shirt ready for tomorrow. Just me, standing still as the grandfather clock ticked away the seconds of my old life. "Sarah?" he called out, hanging his coat on the rack by the door. "Is everything okay? Where's dinner?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice foreign to my own ears. "Your mother had an accident with some papers today." His expression changed instantly, not concern for his mother, but alarm. "What papers?" "The deed to this house, the one that's apparently in my name. Has been for... How long exactly, Robert?" The color drained from his face. He glanced toward the stairs, perhaps hoping his mother would appear and save him from this conversation. When no rescue came, he sighed deeply. "Let's go to the study. We shouldn't discuss this where Dad might overhear." I followed him into the dark paneled room that had always been his sanctuary. The place where he retreated when he didn't want to deal with family matters, which usually meant me or Daniel. "It was supposed to be a surprise," he began, not meeting my eyes as he poured himself a glass of bourbon from the crystal decanter on the desk. "He didn't offer me one. He never did." "For our retirement," I almost laughed. "A surprise? Putting the house in my name without telling me for... How many years, Robert?" He took a long sip before answering. 25 years. Since Dad's second stroke. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. 25 years? I've been living in a house that's legally mine for 25 years, and no one thought to mention it to me? It's complicated, Sarah. He set the glass down, finally looking at me. The business was going through a rough patch. Dad was worried. About liability issues, potential lawsuits. Putting the house in your name protected it from creditors. I stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time in our marriage. This man who had promised to build a life with me had instead built a cage and convinced me it was for my own good. So I was a convenient shield for the family assets, I said flatly. Not a wife, not a partner. Just a name on a document to protect your family's wealth. Don't be dramatic, he scoffed, reaching for the bourbon again. It benefited you too. This house will be yours when my parents are gone." "It's already mine," I said, the realization washing over me like a wave. "Legally, right now, this house belongs to me." Something shifted in his expression then, a flicker of concern that he quickly masked with a condescending smile. "Technically, yes. But you know that's not how family works, Sarah. We all contribute in different ways. Mom and Dad gave us a place to live. I provide financially. And you—" "I what, Robert? I cook, I clean, I care for your parents. I gave up everything I ever wanted for this family. And we're grateful," he said, though nothing in his tone conveyed gratitude. "But let's be practical. What would you have done with a house this size on your own? You could never have afforded the property taxes, the maintenance. We've given you a good life here." The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 7 times, each dong reverberating through my chest like a revelation. 25 years of my life, in a house that was legally mine but functionally theirs. 25 years of being treated like a servant in a home that bore my name on its deed. "I want to see all the documents," I said finally. "Everything." Robert's hand tightened around his glass. "This isn't necessary, Sarah. Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed," I replied, standing my ground. "I want to see the papers tomorrow. All of them." He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to recognize the woman standing before him. Perhaps he couldn't. Perhaps I couldn't recognize myself either. This new Sarah who demanded rather than requested, who stood firm rather than bent to accommodate. "Fine," he conceded finally. "I'll bring everything from the office tomorrow. But, Sarah, don't get any ideas. This arrangement was made for the protection of the entire family." I nodded and turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I'll get dinner started." "Good," he said, relief evident in his voice. He thought the storm had passed, that I would retreat back into my role, that tomorrow would smooth everything over. "Dad's been asking for your pot roast all week." That night, I moved mechanically through my usual routine, cooking dinner, washing dishes, helping Harold into bed, laying out Robert's clothes for the morning. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. Each task I performed felt different, weighted with new understanding. This house that had been my beautiful prison for nearly 4 decades was legally mine. Had been for 25 years. As I lay in bed beside Robert, listening to his steady breathing, I stared at the ceiling and thought about my life. The bakery I never opened. The trips we never took because his parents couldn't be left alone. The way Daniel had grown distant, embarrassed by his plain, subservient mother who never stood up to his grandparents' subtle cruelty. Tomorrow, I would see those papers. Tomorrow, I would understand exactly what had been done without my knowledge. Tomorrow would be the first day of whatever remained of my life. When morning came, I rose earlier than usual. Instead of heading straight to the kitchen to start breakfast, I went to the small desk in the corner of our bedroom where I kept household accounts. I pulled out my personal files, pitifully few compared to the extensive records Robert maintained for family business. Birth certificate, marriage license, our son's school records, a small bank book for the account that held my allowance. Robert stirred, opening one eye to look at me. "What are you doing up so early?" "Just organizing some things," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'll start breakfast in a minute." He nodded and rolled over, already dismissing me from his thoughts. I looked at his sleeping form, this man I had loved once, this man who had seen me as nothing more than a convenient addition to his family's needs. In the kitchen, I prepared breakfast with mechanical precision. Harold's oatmeal with exactly 1 teaspoon of brown sugar, Vivian's dry toast with a scraping of marmalade, Robert's eggs precisely over medium with crisp bacon. As I set the table in the formal dining room where we ate every meal, I noticed how worn my hands had become, how the veins stood out against pale skin that had known decades of cleaning chemicals and hot dishwater. "Sarah, the marmalade is too bitter today," Vivian commented, her first words of the morning carrying their usual critical edge. "I'm sorry, Vivian. I'll get the other jar." I rose automatically to fetch it from the pantry. "And while you're up, my coffee's gone cold," Harold added, pushing his cup toward the edge of the table. Robert didn't even look up from his newspaper. It was the same breakfast scene that had played out thousands of times in this house. But today, something inside me had changed. With each demand, each criticism, each thoughtless assumption that I existed solely to serve, the invisible chains that had bound me for decades weakened just a little bit more. After breakfast, Robert gathered, his briefcase ready to leave for the office. "Don't forget the papers," I reminded him, keeping my voice light as I cleared the table. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. "I said I'd bring them, didn't I? I'll be home at the usual time." But he wouldn't. I already knew the pattern. There would be an urgent meeting, a client dinner, some reason he couldn't make it home until late, too late for serious discussions about property deeds and decades of deception. And I was right. At 7:30 that evening, long after Harold and Vivian had been served their dinner and settled in front of the television, the phone rang. "Sarah, I'm still at the office." Robert's voice came through the line, accompanied by the background noise of what sounded suspiciously like a restaurant. "The Westbrook project has some issues. I probably won't be home until after 10, and—" "The papers?" I asked. A pause. "I didn't have time to gather everything today. Tomorrow, for sure." I hung up without saying goodbye, something I had never done in all our years of marriage. Then I walked to the study, to the antique desk where Robert kept his spare keys. The small brass key to his office downtown was there, nestled among others, in a drawer that was never locked because Robert had never imagined I would have any reason to open it. I held the key in my palm, feeling its weight, the weight of a decision forming in my mind. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 8 times, each ring seeming to ask a question. "What will you do now, Sarah Jensen? What will you do with this power you never knew you had? What will you do with the rest of your life?" I closed my fingers around the key, feeling its edges press into my palm. For 25 years, this house had been legally mine while I lived in it as a servant. For 25 years, I had been lied to by the man who had promised to cherish me. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly what else they had hidden from me. Tomorrow, I would begin to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new life, a life where I was no longer the silent, invisible woman who cleaned up everyone else's messes. But first, I had a visit to make to the downtown office of Jensen Architecture, where I suspected I would find much more than just the Jensen Architecture building stood imposing against the night sky, its glass facade reflecting the city lights like a mirror. I had only visited a handful of times over the decades, for the obligatory Christmas parties where I served hors d'oeuvres while wearing my appropriate dress that Vivian had selected, or the rare occasions when Robert forgot important documents and needed me to deliver them. Tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't coming as Robert Jensen's dutiful wife. The security guard looked up from his crossword puzzle, surprise registering on his face when he saw me. "Mrs. Jensen, evening. Mr. Jensen's not here, left about an hour ago." Of course. He had. The urgent Westbrook project was likely sitting across from him at an upscale restaurant right now, perhaps with a glass of wine in hand. "I know," I smiled, projecting a confidence I was still learning to feel. "I just need to pick up some papers from his office, family business." The guard nodded. He had known me for years, seen me come and go on Robert's errands. Why would tonight be any different? "Go right ahead, Mrs. Jensen. You know the way." I did. 15th floor, corner office with the view of the river that Robert loved to brag about at dinner parties. The elevator ascended silently, each floor bringing me closer to answers I wasn't sure I was ready for. The office was dark when I unlocked it, moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I didn't turn on the main lights, using only the small desk lamp to illuminate my search. Robert's office was immaculate, Unlike our son's bedroom had been growing up, unlike the kitchen after Harold demanded his midnight snacks. Robert had always expected order from everyone else, but maintained it himself only where it mattered to him. His filing cabinet yielded nothing unusual at first. Project files, client contracts, company financial records. But the bottom drawer was locked. Another key on the ring I'd taken from home fit perfectly. Inside were personal files, separate from the business. I found what I was looking for almost immediately. A folder labeled Jensen Estate. My hands trembled as I opened it, spreading the contents across Robert's polished mahogany desk. The deed I'd glimpsed at home was there, confirming what I already knew. The house had been transferred to my name 25 years ago. But there was more. So much more. Insurance policies, investment accounts, a summer cottage in Maine I'd never heard of. All in my name. I sank into Robert's leather chair, documents clutched in my shaking hands. This went far beyond protecting the family home from business creditors. This was a systematic transfer of assets, all placed in my name, all controlled by the Jensen family, all hidden from me. A yellow legal pad caught my eye, filled with Robert's precise handwriting. Notes from a meeting with their family attorney dated just 6 months ago. My eyes scanned the page, catching phrases that made my blood run cold. Discuss with Sarah before Harold's condition deteriorates further. Transfer control of accounts, back to RJ upon HJ's passing. SJ unlikely to contest given history. They had been planning to reclaim everything once Harold died. They had been confident I would simply sign whatever was put in front of me, as I had done for 37 years. They had been counting on my ignorance, my compliance, my gratitude for being allowed to exist in their world. I was so absorbed in my discovery that I didn't hear the office door open. "What do you think you're doing?" I looked up to find Patricia Winters standing in the doorway. Robert's executive assistant for the past 15 years, she had always treated me with a thin veneer of politeness that barely concealed her contempt. To her, I was the embarrassing housewife who had somehow trapped the brilliant Robert Jensen, a domestic inconvenience who knew nothing about architecture or business. "Hello, Patricia," I said calmly, not moving from Robert's chair. "Working late?" Her eyes darted to the papers spread across the desk, recognition dawning on her face. "Those are confidential documents. Does Robert know you're here?" "I'm looking at property deeds and financial accounts in my name," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I hardly think I need my husband's permission to view them." Patricia's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose slightly. "I should call Robert." "By all means." I gestured to the phone on the desk. "I'd like to speak with him as well. Perhaps he can explain why my name is on properties I've never visited and accounts I've never accessed." Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, then a flicker of what might have been respect. "He's at dinner with the Westbrook clients," she said, her tone more measured now. "He won't appreciate being interrupted." "I'm sure he won't." I gathered the documents into a neat pile. But after 37 years of not being interrupted in his deceptions, perhaps it's time. Patricia took a step into the office, closing the door behind her. For a moment, I thought she might try to stop me from taking the papers. Instead, she walked to a small filing cabinet behind Robert's desk that I hadn't noticed. "If you're looking for the whole picture," she said, unlocking it with her own key, "you should see these too." She handed me another folder, this one unlabeled. Inside were more financial documents, more properties, more accounts, all connected to me in some way. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, suddenly wary. Patricia's professional mask slipped. "Just for a moment. Let's just say I've worked here long enough to know how the Jensen men operate. My mother cleaned this office for 20 years before I ever set foot in it. She raised me on her own after my father walked out." She straightened, her tailored blazer, I don't particularly like you, Mrs. Jensen, but no woman deserves to be used the way they've used you. I stared at her, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the cold, efficient assistant who looked through me at company functions, but a woman who had watched from the sidelines as I was manipulated for decades. "Thank you," I said simply. She nodded once, professionally. "I'll give you 20 minutes before I call Robert. That should be enough time to make copies of whatever you need." After she left, I worked quickly, using the office copier to duplicate every document. Evidence of 25 years of financial manipulation, all neatly preserved in black and white. When I finished, I returned the originals exactly as I'd found them, leaving no trace of my discovery. Patricia was waiting by the elevator when I left, her face carefully neutral. "Mr. Jensen called the office looking for some files," she said, loudly enough for the security guard to hear. "I've informed him you're delivering them home." Our eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. Whatever her reasons, Patricia Winters had just become an unexpected ally in a battle I was only beginning to understand. "Thank you, Patricia," I said. "I appreciate your assistance." The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with implications and possibilities. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the house that was legally mine, I had made my decision. The house was quiet when I entered. Harold and Vivian would be asleep by now, their evening medications ensuring they wouldn't stir until morning. I went straight to my small desk in the bedroom and added the new documents to my growing collection of evidence. Then I did something I had never done before. I called my son. Daniel answered on the fourth ring, his voice wary. "Mom, is everything okay? It's nearly midnight." "Everything's fine," I assured him, realizing I rarely called him unless there was a problem with his grandparents. "I was wondering if we could meet for lunch tomorrow, just the two of us." The pause that followed spoke volumes about our relationship. Sure. Is this about Grandpa?" "No, it's about me. About some decisions I need to make." Another pause. "Okay, the usual place at noon?" The usual place was a diner halfway between our house and Daniel's office, where we met occasionally for hurried lunches dominated by discussions of Harold's health or family business matters. Never personal conversations, never my life or his. "Actually, no, there's a new cafe on Riverside Drive, Bluebird Bakery, let's meet there." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the room I had shared with Robert for decades. It had always been his room, his furniture choices, his color scheme, his convenience prioritized in every detail. Like the rest of the house, it reflected nothing of me. Tomorrow would change that. Tomorrow, I would begin to reclaim what had been taken from me. Not just property or money, but my very identity. I was still sitting there when Robert came home, shortly after 1 a.m, smelling of expensive scotch and wearing the slightly rumpled look of a man who has spent hours charming clients. "You're still up," he noted, loosening his tie. "Everything okay with Dad?" Always his first concern. Never me. "Your father is fine," I replied. "I went to your office tonight." He froze, tie dangling from his fingers. "You did what?" "I found the files. Robert. All of them." His face cycled through emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally settling on patronizing concern. "Sarah, you had no right to go through my private business documents." "They weren't private business documents. They were documents about properties and accounts in my name. Properties I've never seen, accounts I've never used." He sighed heavily, as if dealing with a difficult child. "It's complicated, Sarah. Family finances at this level always are. You've never shown any interest in—" "Don't," I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Don't pretend this was for my benefit or that I wasn't interested. You deliberately kept me in the dark for 25 years while using my name to protect your family's assets." Robert's jaw tightened. He hung his tie carefully on the rack, inside his closet buying time. When he turned back, his expression had softened into something almost sincere. "It wasn't like that, Sarah. Yes, we put assets in your name for protection, but it was all for our future together, for our family. Everything I've done has been to secure our legacy." "Our legacy?" I echoed. "Or your parents' legacy? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I've spent my entire adult life serving your parents while you built your father's business. Where exactly do I fit into this legacy, Robert? Where does our son fit in?" At the mention of Daniel, something flickered in Robert's eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or just irritation at being questioned. "Daniel understands his place in the family. He's being groomed to take over the firm when I retire." "Does he want that?" Robert looked genuinely confused by the question. "Of course he does. It's the Jensen legacy." I thought about our son, the quiet, thoughtful boy who had loved drawing but never architecture, who had wanted to study literature but had been steered firmly toward business management. I wondered if Robert even knew who Daniel really was, any more than he knew who I was. "I'm meeting Daniel for lunch tomorrow," I said. "Alone." Robert frowned. "What for?" "If this is about the property arrangements, there's no need to involve him. It's between us." "No, it's about me finally having a conversation with my son without the Jensen family agenda hanging over us." "You're being dramatic," Robert said dismissively, beginning to unbutton his shirt. "If you'd like me to explain the financial arrangements properly, I can do that tomorrow. But I'd appreciate it if you'd return the documents you took from my office." "I didn't take anything," I said truthfully. "I made copies." His hand stilled on his buttons. "That was unnecessary." "Was it?" "Because according to your notes, you were planning to transfer everything back into your name after your father dies, without discussing it with me." A muscle twitched in Robert's jaw. "Those were just preliminary considerations. Nothing had been decided." "Nothing about my own property had been decided? How generous of you." "Sarah." His voice took on the warning tone he used when he thought I was overstepping. "You're tired. We'll discuss this in the morning when you're thinking more clearly." In the past, I would have backed down, apologized even, made him breakfast in the morning and pretended the conversation had never happened. But that Sarah was gone, dissolved in the acid truth of decades of deception. "Yes, we'll discuss it tomorrow," I agreed, my voice calm. "After I've spoken with my son, after I've consulted with an attorney of my own." That got his attention. "An attorney? For God's sake, Sarah, there's no need to bring lawyers into a family matter. According to these documents, it stopped being just a family matter 25 years ago, when you put millions of dollars of assets in my name without my knowledge or consent." Robert stared at me, truly seeing me perhaps for the first time in our marriage. "What exactly are you planning to do?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm planning to understand exactly what belongs to me, legally and morally. I'm planning to make decisions about my future based on complete information for the first time in my adult life." "You wouldn't even have a future without this family," he snapped, his composure finally cracking. "Where would you be without me? Still living in that tiny apartment over your mother's sewing shop? Working in some corner bakery for minimum wage? Everything you have, this house, your lifestyle, your position in society, you owe to the Jensen name." I let his words wash over me, feeling their sting, but not their power. "You may be right about where I'd be," I conceded, "but at least I'd be there honestly as myself, not as a pawn in someone else's game." Robert's face flushed with anger. For a moment I thought he might continue arguing, but instead he grabbed his pillow from the bed. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. We'll discuss this tomorrow when you're thinking rationally again." After he left, I sat alone in the silent bedroom, feeling strangely peaceful despite the confrontation. For the first time in decades, I had spoken my truth without softening it to protect Robert's feelings, without bending to accommodate the Jensen family expectations. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Lunch with Daniel, potentially another. Confrontation with Robert, the beginning of whatever legal process lay ahead. But for tonight, I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. I opened the window, breathing in the cool night air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car passed on the street below. The world continued turning, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in Sarah Jensen's universe. For 37 years, I had lived as an appendage to the Jensen family, my identity subsumed by their needs and expectations. But tonight, I had remembered something important. Before I was a Jensen, I was Sarah Elizabeth Collins, a woman with dreams, ambitions, and a voice of her own. It was time to find her again. Bluebird Bakery sat on a corner of Riverside Drive, its cheerful blue awning fluttering in the spring breeze. I arrived 30 minutes early, my nerves propelling me out of the house before Robert or his parents could corner me with questions or demands. The cafe was everything I had once dreamed of creating: warm lighting, the intoxicating aroma of fresh bread, glass cases displaying artfully decorated pastries. A lifetime ago, I had sketched designs for my own bakery on napkins and the backs of envelopes, planning the menu and imagining the joy of creating something that was truly mine. "First time?" asked the young woman behind the counter, her smile genuine. "Yes," I admitted, studying the menu board. "Everything looks wonderful. The lemon scones are our specialty. Just came out of the oven." I ordered a scone and a pot of Earl Grey, then settled at a small table by the window. As I waited for Daniel, I watched the bakery staff work with practiced efficiency. The young woman at the counter chatting warmly with customers, a baker visible through the kitchen doorway expertly shaping dough. They moved with purpose and pride, creating something together. When was the last time I had felt that kind of satisfaction in my daily work? The endless cleaning, cooking, and caretaking for the Jensens had long ago ceased to bring me any joy. It was just what was expected, what I owed them for allowing me into their exalted family. "Mom?" I looked up to find Daniel standing beside my table, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. At 35, he looked more like Robert every year. The same strong jaw, the same serious eyes, but there was something softer in his face too, something I liked to think came from me. Daniel. I stood to embrace him, feeling the now familiar awkwardness of our physical contact. When had we become so formal with each other? "Thank you for coming." "Of course." He glanced around the bakery. "New place?" "I've been wanting to try it." I gestured to the chair across from mine. "Join me?" After ordering coffee and a sandwich, Daniel turned to me with the slightly wary expression I'd grown accustomed to seeing, as if he was bracing himself for bad news about his grandparents or some new family obligation. "So," he began cautiously, "you said this wasn't about Grandpa?" "No." I took a sip of my tea, gathering courage. "It's about me. About some things I've discovered and decisions I need to make." I told him everything: finding the deed, the visit to Robert's office, the extent of the financial deception. As I spoke, Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally to a cold anger I had rarely seen in my gentle son. "They used you," he said when I finished, his coffee untouched before him. "All these years they've been using you as a financial shield while treating you like the help." Hearing him say it aloud made it more real somehow. "Yes. And Dad was part of this? The whole time?" The pain in his voice made my heart ache. Whatever my issues with Robert, he was still Daniel's father, still the man our son had looked up to his entire life. "Your father believes he was doing what was best for the family," I said carefully. "For the Jensen legacy." Daniel's mouth twisted bitterly. The precious Jensen legacy. God forbid anything threaten that. Something in his tone made me pause. "Daniel, are you happy at the firm?" He looked startled by the question, as if no one had ever bothered to ask before. Perhaps no one had. He hesitated, then seemed to deflate slightly. No, I've never been happy there. But it's what was expected. What Grandpa wanted. What Dad wants. What do you want? The question hung between us, so simple yet so profound. Daniel stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. I wanted to teach, he said finally, his voice quiet. Literature. I've been taking night classes for a teaching credential for the past 2 years. No one in the family knows. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner. It's not your fault, Mom. We all got caught in their orbit, the great Jensen family plan. He squeezed my hand. But what are you going to do now? About the house? The other properties? I'm meeting with an attorney this afternoon. I hadn't planned it until this moment, but saying it aloud made it real, necessary. I need to understand my legal position before I decide anything. Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. You should talk to Marion Chen. She handled my friend. Trevor's divorced last year. His ex came from a wealthy family that had done some creative accounting. Marion sorted it all out. He pulled out his phone. I can text you her number. Thank you. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on me. Will you be okay? If things change between your father and me? Daniel's eyes met mine, steadier than I had seen them in years. Mom, I'm 35 years old. Whatever happens between you and Dad is between you and Dad. I just want you both to be happy, really happy, not just going through the motions for the sake of appearances. I felt tears prick behind my eyes. When had my son become so wise? And how had I missed it, buried as I was in the daily drudgery of serving the Jensen household? There's something else, Daniel continued, looking slightly uncomfortable. I've been meaning to tell you for a while, but the timing never seemed right. What is it? I'm seeing someone. Her name is Layla. She's a kindergarten teacher. A smile transformed his face, lighting it from within. We've been together for almost a year. A year? I echoed, shocked that I knew nothing about this significant person in my son's life. Why haven't you brought her to meet us? Daniel's smile faded. Honestly, because of Grandma and Grandpa. Because of the way they treated you all these years. Because Layla's parents are immigrants who own a small grocery store, and I couldn't bear to see them look at her the way they look at you. His words hit me like a physical blow. My son had hidden his relationship to protect his girlfriend from the same treatment I had endured for decades, and I had been so caught up in the Jensen family drama that I hadn't even noticed. I want to meet her, I said firmly. Soon. You'd like her, Daniel replied, his smile returning. She's kind and funny and doesn't take any crap from anyone. Reminds me a bit of you, actually. The real you, not the you that Grandma tried to create. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Had Daniel seen me more clearly than I had seen myself all these years? After lunch, we walked to our cars together. Before parting, Daniel hugged me. A real hug. Tight and meaningful. Not the perfunctory embrace we had shared in recent years. Whatever you decide, Mom, I'm on your side, he whispered. It's about time someone in that house was. As I drove to the attorney's office, Daniel's words echoed in my mind. The real you, not the you that Grandma tried to create. Who was the real Sarah Jensen? Or rather, who was Sarah Collins? The woman I had been before the Jensen family absorbed me into their world. Marion Chen's office was in a modern building downtown, her name displayed in sleek silver letters on a frosted glass door. The woman herself matched her office, efficient, direct, with an air of formidable competence that put me instantly at ease. Mrs. Jensen, she greeted me, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Daniel spoke highly of you when he called. I understand you've made some concerning discoveries about your family's financial arrangements. I handed her the folder of documents I had copied from Robert's office. Everything I know is in here. I'm not even sure where to begin. Marian reviewed the documents methodically, her expression growing increasingly grave. After 20 minutes, she looked up at me over her reading glasses. Mrs. Jensen, to put it bluntly, you've been used as a financial straw person for over 2 decades. Your husband and his family have systematically placed valuable assets in your name without your knowledge or consent, while maintaining effective control over them. Is it illegal? I asked. Not necessarily, but it's certainly unethical, and there's a strong case for fraud, given that you were never informed of these arrangements. She tapped the legal pad with Robert's notes. These planning documents suggesting they intended to transfer everything back once his father passed away. That's particularly troubling. What are my options? Marian leaned back in her chair, considering. That depends on what you want, Mrs. Jensen. Do you want to remain in this marriage? The question struck me with unexpected force. Did I? After 37 years, after raising a child together, after building a life, albeit one based on deception, did I want to stay married to Robert Jensen? I don't know, I admitted. I need to understand my position first. What's legally mine? What control do I actually have? Based on these documents, quite a lot. Marian began ticking off points on her fingers. The family home is entirely in your name. The summer property in Maine, also yours. Investment accounts totaling approximately $3.7 million, legally yours. Ownership stake in Jensen Architecture, 30% in your name. I felt slightly dizzy. I own part of the firm? According to these documents, yes. It appears they transferred ownership shares to you during a period when the company was facing potential liability issues, a common tactic to protect assets from creditors. But the shares are legitimately yours. Robert never told me. I'm not surprised. Marian's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Jensen, may I speak frankly? I nodded. In my experience, when men from wealthy families arrange their finances this way, it's rarely with their spouse's best interests at heart. It's about control and protection of family wealth. The fact that your husband planned to reclaim these assets after his father's death speaks volumes about his intentions. What should I do now? First, we secure your assets. I'll file paperwork immediately to ensure nothing can be transferred without your explicit consent. She opened a drawer and pulled out several forms. Next, we need to decide how to proceed, whether you want to negotiate from within the marriage or pursue a separation. And if I decide to leave, then you would be leaving with significant financial security. Marian's gaze was direct. The house is yours. The investments are yours. Your stake in the family business gives you considerable leverage. You would not be starting over from nothing, Mrs. Jensen. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had never lived alone, never managed significant finances, never made major decisions without Robert's input. Or more accurately, Robert's direction. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. But I strongly advise you to sign these protective orders today, before your husband realizes the extent of your knowledge and takes steps to secure the assets himself. I signed the papers, my signature steadier than I expected. As I did, I felt something shift inside me, a sense of reclaiming power I had surrendered long ago. Mrs. Jensen, Marian said as I prepared to leave. One more thing. Many women in your position struggle with guilt when they finally stand up for themselves. They've been conditioned to put everyone else's needs before their own for so long that advocating for themselves feels wrong, selfish even. I nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. Remember this. Taking back what is legally and morally, yours isn't selfish, it's justice. The drive home was both shorter and longer than I expected, the physical distance unchanged, but my internal landscape altered beyond recognition. I was no longer just Robert Jensen's wife or Harold and Vivian's daughter-in-law. I was Sarah Jensen, owner of a historic home, holder of investment accounts worth millions, partial owner of an architectural firm. More importantly, I was becoming Sarah Collins again, the woman with dreams and opinions and boundaries who had been submerged beneath decades of compliance. The house, my house, was quiet when I returned. A note on the kitchen counter informed me that Robert had taken his parents to their doctor's appointments and they would be dining out afterward. The small act of consideration, letting me know they wouldn't need dinner, would have once filled me with gratitude. Now I recognized it for what it was, the minimal courtesy you extend to the help. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom and began packing a small suitcase. Not everything, just enough for a few days. Then I dialed Daniel's number. "Mom, everything okay with the lawyer?" "Yes, better than okay, actually." I zipped the suitcase closed. "Daniel, I need a favor. Could I stay with you for a few days? I need some space to think, away from the house." His response was immediate. "Of course. I'll text you my address." "And Mom?" "Yes?" "I'm proud of you." 3 simple words I had said to him countless times throughout his life, but had rarely heard directed at me. They settled in my chest like a warm light, illuminating corners long left dark. I left another note, next to Robert's, simple and direct. "I'm staying with Daniel for a few days. We'll talk when I return. Sarah." As I placed my suitcase in the car, Mrs. Abernathy from next door waved from her garden. "Going somewhere, Sarah?" "Just visiting my son for a few days," I replied, surprising myself with how easily the half-truth came. "How lovely. You deserve a break from caring for your in-laws. Such a saint you are, looking after them all these years." I smiled politely, but inside, a small voice whispered, "Not a saint. A woman. A whole person with her own needs and desires." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn as I backed out of the driveway. For the first time in 37 years, I was leaving the Jensen estate not on an errand for the family, not to serve their needs, but for myself. The rearview mirror. The grand house grew smaller, its imposing facade diminishing with distance. I thought of all the years I had spent within those walls, polishing silver that wasn't mine, arranging flowers in vases I hadn't chosen, preparing meals I rarely got to enjoy, but the house was mine now, legally if not yet emotionally. And so, was my future, uncertain and frightening, but finally, truly mine. As I turned onto the main road, my phone began to ring. Robert's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, habit nearly made me answer immediately, as I always had. Instead, I turned off the ringer and continued driving toward Daniel's apartment, toward the first night of my new life. A life where Sarah Jensen was no longer invisible, no longer silent, no longer merely the woman who cleaned up after the Jensen family. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, difficult conversations, perhaps even more painful realizations. But today, driving away from the house that had been both my prison and, as it turned out, my property, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Freedom. Daniel's apartment was a revelation. Located on the 5th floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, it was nothing like the Jensen family aesthetic I had lived with for decades. Exposed brick walls, towering windows, and bookshelves, so many bookshelves, overflowing with literature, poetry, and literary criticism. It was the home of the son I hadn't fully known, the teacher he was becoming in secret. "It's not much," he said as he took my suitcase. "But it's mine." "Well, rented, but you know what I mean." "It's wonderful," I replied, running my fingers along the spines of his books. "It's so you." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That's the highest compliment you could give it." He glanced at his watch. "Layla will be here in about an hour. She's bringing dinner. I hope that's okay? She's been wanting to meet you for so long." "Of course it's okay. I'm looking forward to meeting her too." While Daniel made coffee, I wandered around his apartment, absorbing the details of his life that I had missed. Framed poetry on the walls, Photographs of places I didn't recognize. A battered leather armchair that looked well-loved and nothing like the pristine furniture in the Jensen house. "Is this from your travels?" I asked, pointing to a black and white photograph of ancient ruins. Daniel looked up from the kitchen counter. "Yeah, that's from the summer I backpacked through Greece after graduation." I stared at him. "You backpacked through Greece?" He paused, coffee scoop in hand. "You didn't know? I thought Dad told you." "No," I said quietly. He didn't. A shadow crossed Daniel's face. That's not right. I sent postcards to the house. I called a few times. I never received any postcards." The implications settled heavily between us. "What else have I missed, Daniel?" He set down the coffee scoop and leaned against the counter. "Mom, there's a lot we need to talk about. About the past, about how things have been with the family." Before he could continue, his phone chimed. He glanced at it, his expression brightening. "Layla's downstairs. I'll go help her with the food." Left alone, I continued exploring the apartment, trying to reconcile this space with the son I thought I knew. A framed teaching certificate hung near his desk, dated just 3 months ago. A stack of graded papers sat beside his laptop, literature essays from high school students, covered in thoughtful comments in Daniel's neat handwriting. My phone rang again, Robert's 5th call since I'd left the house. This time I answered. "Where the hell are you?" His voice was tight with controlled anger. "We came home to find you gone with nothing but a cryptic note." "I'm at Daniel's," I replied calmly. As my note said. "Why? What possible reason could you have for abandoning your responsibilities like this? Dad needs his evening medication, and you know how particular Mom is about her dinner routine. I'm sure you can manage for a few days, Robert. You're not helpless." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I needed some time to think. Think about what? If this is still about those financial arrangements, I told you I'd explain. Everything. Yes, you've had 25 years to explain, and somehow never found the time. I took a deep breath. I've spoken with an attorney, Robert. The silence that followed was deafening. "You did what?" he finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I needed to understand my legal position. Now I do. "So this is how it's going to be? After 37 years of marriage, you're going to lawyers instead of talking to your husband?" "I tried talking to you. You dismissed me. You've been dismissing me for decades." I heard voices in the background, Harold asking loudly what was happening, Vivian's shrill insistence that Robert put me in my place. "You need to come home, Sarah. Now. We'll sort this out as a family." "No, Robert. I'll come back when I'm ready, and we'll sort this out as equals, not as the great Robert Jensen and his convenient wife." I ended the call before he could respond, my hand shaking but my resolve firm. The door opened, and Daniel entered carrying takeout bags, followed by a woman with warm brown skin, curly hair pulled into a loose bun, and the brightest smile I'd ever seen. "Mom, this is Layla Nazari," Daniel said, his voice softening as he looked at her. "Layla, my mom, Sarah Jensen." "Mrs. Jensen." Layla stepped forward and embraced me without hesitation. "I've been looking forward to meeting you for so long. Daniel talks about you constantly." Her warmth was so genuine, so uncomplicated compared to the calculated social graces of the Jensen circle. I hugged her back, feeling tears threaten. "Please, call me Sarah." The evening that followed was unlike any I had experienced in decades, relaxed, filled with laughter and honest conversation. Layla was exactly as Daniel had described, kind, funny, and refreshingly direct. Over Lebanese food, which I'd never tried before, she told stories of her classroom adventures and her large, boisterous family. "You have to meet them, Sarah," she insisted, passing me more hummus. "My mother will adopt you on the spot. She's always collecting people. Says the more hearts around the table, the better the food tastes. The concept was so foreign to my experience with the Jensens, where dinners were formal affairs designed to maintain hierarchy and reinforce family expectations. I couldn't remember the last time a meal had been about joy rather than obligation. After dinner, when Layla excused herself to make a phone call, Daniel turned to me with serious eyes. "Mom, there's something we need to discuss. About the situation with Dad and the family assets." I nodded, bracing myself. "I did some research today after we met for lunch. Called a few contacts at the firm who owe me favors." He pulled out his laptop. "There's more to this than just putting assets in your name to protect them from business creditors." He opened a folder of documents, company records, tax filings, board minutes. "The firm has been in financial trouble several times over the past 20 years. Grandpa made some risky investments that nearly sank them in the early 2000s. Then again during the recession in 2008. I didn't know any of this. No one outside the inner circle did, but each time they used your name to secure loans, to restructure debt, to move assets around." Daniel's expression was grim. "Mom, they've been using you as much more than a shield. You've been their safety net, their secret financial resource. And according to these records, they've been doing it knowing that you were completely in the dark." The implications settled like a stone in my stomach. "How bad is it?" "It's not good, but it's not criminal. At least not technically. Unethical, definitely. And it puts you in a much stronger position than even your lawyer probably realizes." He looked up at me. "You don't just own 30% of the firm. You personally guaranteed loans that saved it from bankruptcy. Twice. Does your father know that you know this?" Daniel shook his head. "No. As far as he's concerned, I'm just the dutiful son being groomed to take over someday. He has no idea I've been investigating the company finances for years." "Why didn't you tell me?" His eyes filled with regret. "I tried, Mom, a few times, but you were always so dedicated to keeping the peace, to doing what Dad and Grandpa wanted. And honestly, until recently, I didn't have the courage to break away myself. The weight of lost opportunities, of conversations never had, of truths never shared settled between us. All the years we could have been allies, supporting each other against the Jensen family expectations, lost to my fear and compliance." "What changed?" I asked. "For you, I mean. What gave you the courage to start planning your escape?" Daniel smiled. "Layla. Meeting someone who saw me, really saw me, not just the Jensen heir, made me realize how much of myself I'd compromised." He reached for my hand. "And seeing how they treated you all these years. It wasn't right, Mom. None of it was right." Layla returned, sensing the emotional moment between us. "Family stuff?" she asked gently. Daniel nodded. "I was just telling Mom about the company research." "The great Jensen house of cards," Layla said, settling beside Daniel on the couch. "Sorry, Sarah, I don't mean to be flip about your family, but the more Daniel uncovered, the more outraged I became on your behalf." "It's okay," I assured her. "I'm still processing it all myself." "You know," Layla said thoughtfully, "my father always says that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. The Jensens have been showing you who they are for decades." Her words resonated deeply. The Jensens had indeed shown me exactly who they were from the beginning. People who valued status and appearance above humanity, who viewed me as a useful addition to their household but never as an equal, who would use me without hesitation or remorse. "What are you going to do now, Mom?" Daniel asked. It was the question I had been asking myself since discovering the deed. What did I want my life to be, now that I understood the truth of the past 37 years? "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I know I can't go back to the way things were." That night, sleeping in Daniel's guest room, I dreamed of my mother, a seamstress who had raised me alone after my father died, who had taught me to bake, who had encouraged my dreams of owning a bakery someday. In the dream, she sat beside me at a kitchen table, her work-worn hands covering mine. "You were always meant for more than this, Sarah," she said. "It's not too late." I woke with tears on my pillow but a strange sense of peace in my heart. My mother had died just before I married Robert, never getting to see what my life would become. Would she have recognized the warning signs I had missed? Would she have cautioned me against losing myself so completely in service to a family that would never truly accept me? The morning brought a flurry of text messages and voicemails from Robert, each more demanding than the last. His parents were upset. The house was in disarray. He had important clients coming for dinner and no one to prepare the meal. The list of my failings grew with each message, culminating in a thinly veiled threat. "If you insist on pursuing this ridiculous legal angle, you should know that my family has connections throughout this city. No court will side with you against the Jensens." I showed the message to Daniel over breakfast. "Classic dad," he said, shaking his head. "When reason fails, resort to intimidation. It's the Jensen way." "Do you think he's right?" "About the courts?" "No. The law is clear, and your lawyer sounds formidable. Besides," he added with a wry smile, "the Jensens aren't as powerful as they like to believe. Their reputation has been slipping for years. Dad's just desperately trying to maintain the illusion of the dynasty." After breakfast, I made a decision. I need to go back to the house, not to stay, but to gather more of my things, and to face Robert. Daniel looked concerned. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No. This is something I need to do myself." I squeezed his hand. "But thank you for everything." The drive back to the Jensen estate felt different now. The imposing house at the end of the tree-lined drive no longer intimidated me. It was just a building, a beautiful one certainly, but no longer the fortress of standards and expectations it had once been. Robert's car was in the driveway, along with his father's vintage Bentley that hadn't been driven in years but was maintained nonetheless as a symbol of Jensen prosperity. I parked behind them and walked up the steps to the front door, my front door according to the deed. I used my key and entered to find Robert pacing in the foyer, phone to his ear. He froze when he saw me. "She's here now. I'll call you back," he said tersely before ending the call. "Finally decided to come home, have you?" "I came to get more of my things," I replied calmly. "And to talk." His face hardened. "If you think you're moving out permanently, you're mistaken. This behavior is unacceptable, Sarah. My parents are beside themselves." "Where are they?" "Dad's resting. Mom's upstairs, furious that the lunch you were supposed to prepare for her bridge club is now canceled." He stepped closer. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Having to tell people my wife has taken off on some midlife crisis." "Is that what you think this is?" I asked, moving past him toward the stairs. "A midlife crisis." He followed me. "What else would you call it? Suddenly questioning arrangements that have worked perfectly well for decades, threatening legal action against your own family, abandoning your responsibilities?" I turned to face him at the foot of the stairs. "I call it finally standing up for myself, after discovering my husband and his family have been using me as a financial pawn for 25 years. That's a dramatic interpretation of practical financial planning," he scoffed. "I expected better from you, Sarah. And I expected honesty from you, Robert. Seems we've both been disappointed." I continued up the stairs, Robert still following closely. "My attorney has filed protective orders on all the properties and accounts in my name," I informed him as we reached the landing. "Nothing can be transferred or sold without my explicit consent now." His face flushed with anger. "You had no right." "I had every right. They're in my name, Robert. Legally, they're mine. They were put in your name for safekeeping, not for you to suddenly claim ownership." "Safekeeping. I repeated the word, letting its full absurdity sink in. For 25 years, without my knowledge or consent. It was for the good of the family. Your family, not mine. I've never been part of your family, Robert. I've been your domestic help with a convenient legal status that you could exploit. Before he could respond, Vivian appeared in the doorway of her bedroom, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "There you are," she said coldly. "Have you any idea of the chaos you've caused? Harold hasn't been able to sleep. His blood pressure is dangerously high because of your selfish behavior." For perhaps the first time in our relationship, I saw her clearly, not as the intimidating matriarch of the Jensen clan, but as an aging woman whose entire identity was wrapped up in family status and control. "I'm sorry Harold is unwell," I said sincerely, "but I'm not responsible for his health issues." Vivian drew herself up, affronted. "How dare you? After all we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Vivian?" I asked quietly. "Criticized? My housekeeping? Dismissed my background? Treated me like a servant in my own home?" "Your home?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "This is the Jensen family home. It has been for generations." "Actually, Mother," Robert interjected, looking uncomfortable, "legally, the house is in Sarah's name. Has been since Dad's second stroke." Vivian's face paled. "What are you saying?" "The house is mine," I confirmed. "Along with the summer property in Maine, investment accounts worth millions, and 30% of Jensen architecture." "That's not possible," Vivian whispered, her hand fluttering to her throat, clutching at her ever-present pearls. "Robert, tell me this isn't true." "It was for protection, Mother. Asset security. Nothing has changed. Sarah understands that." He turned to me, his expression hardening. "Don't you, Sarah?" I met his gaze steadily. "No, Robert. Everything has changed. I understand now that I've been manipulated and used for decades. I understand that I have legal rights you never intended me to exercise. Most importantly, I understand that I deserve better than this." "You ungrateful," Vivian began, but stopped abruptly as Harold appeared behind her, his walker scraping against the hardwood floor. "What's all this shouting?" he demanded, his voice weaker than I remembered but his eyes still sharp with authority. "Sarah? Where have you been? My medication schedule is completely disrupted." "I'm sorry, Harold," I said, and I meant it. Whatever. My issues with the family, the elderly man before me, was genuinely unwell. I needed some time away to think. "Nonsense," he barked. "Your place is here, taking care of this family. That's what we brought you in for." His words hung in the air, nakedly revealing the truth I had always known but never fully acknowledged. To Harold Jensen, I was an acquisition, brought in for a purpose, to serve the needs of the real family. "Dad," Robert said warningly, "now isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I countered. "Finally, we're getting honesty." I turned to Harold. "I've learned about the financial arrangements, Harold. About how the family used my name to protect assets, to guarantee loans, to save the firm from your risky investments." Harold's face reddened dangerously. "Who told you—" He stopped, his gaze shifting to Robert. "You let this happen. You lost control of your wife." "No one controls me anymore," I said firmly. "Those days are over." I stepped past them into the master bedroom, my bedroom in my house, and began methodically packing more of my belongings. Robert followed me, closing the door behind him. "Sarah, please," he said, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "Let's discuss this rationally. Whatever you think you know, whatever legal position you believe you're in, we can work this out." I continued packing, selecting items with deliberate care. Photographs of Daniel, my mother's old recipe book, the few pieces of jewelry that had true sentimental value rather than the expensive but meaningless pieces Robert had given me over the years. "What exactly are you proposing, Robert?" That we go back to the way things were? That I continue serving your parents, maintaining your household, with no voice, no agency, no respect? They're elderly, he argued. They need care. They need stability. They need professional caregivers, I corrected him. Not a daughter-in-law. They've been exploiting for decades. And what about us? Our marriage? 37 years, Sarah. Does that mean nothing to you? I paused, looking at him. Really looking at the man I had married all those years ago. The handsome face now lined with age, the confident posture now slightly stooped, the eyes that had once made my heart race now calculating even in apparent vulnerability. What exactly is our marriage, Robert? We share a bed, a house, a son. But what else? When was the last time you asked about my dreams, my needs, my happiness? When was the last time you saw me as a partner rather than a convenience? His silence was answer enough. I'm not making any permanent decisions today, I said, zipping the suitcase closed. I need more time to think, to consult with my attorney, to figure out what I want the rest of my life to look like. And what am I supposed to tell my parents, the staff at the firm, our friends? Always concerned with appearances. Always the Jensen legacy first. Tell them the truth, Robert. That after discovering I own the house we've lived in for decades, I've decided to reassess our arrangement. I lifted the suitcase. Or tell them whatever story preserves your precious family image. I don't care anymore. As I walked out of the bedroom, Vivian and Harold were still in the hallway, their faces a study in shock and outrage. This isn't over, Vivian hissed as I passed her. You're nothing without the Jensen name. I paused, looking back at the woman who had made me feel inferior for nearly 4 decades. You're wrong, Vivian. I was Sarah Collins before I was Sarah Jensen, and it's time I remembered who she was. I descended the stairs, Robert following behind, still arguing, still trying to assert control over a situation that had slipped beyond his grasp. At the front door, I turned to him one last time. I'll be in touch through my attorney about next steps. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay in the house. It is your home, too, regardless of whose name is on the deed. But things will be different. Now, Robert, I hope you can accept that. His face hardened, the mask of reasonableness slipping to reveal the anger beneath. You'll regret this, Sarah. The Jensens take care of their own, but we also remember those who betray us. I smiled, feeling strangely calm in the face of his threat. Goodbye, Robert. As I placed my suitcase in the car, I noticed the Bluebird bakery at the end of the street, its cheerful blue awning fluttering in the spring breeze. On impulse, I drove there instead of immediately returning to Daniel's apartment. The same young woman was behind the counter, her smile just as welcoming as before. Back so soon? She asked. The scones were irresistible, I replied, glancing around the warm, inviting space. Is the owner in by any chance? I'd love to speak with them. That's me, she said, extending her hand. Emma Bluebird, first-generation baker, living the dream. Sarah Jensen, I replied, shaking her hand. Former aspiring baker, looking to start over. Emma's eyes lit up with interest. Well, Sarah Jensen, why don't you come into the back and tell me more? I happen to be looking for someone with experience who might want to learn the business side of things. As I followed her into the kitchen, the scent of fresh bread enveloped me like a promise. Of all the paths I could take with my newfound freedom and financial security, returning to my first love, baking, seemed like the most fitting beginning. For 37 years, I had cleaned up after the Jensens, sacrificing my dreams on the altar of their family legacy. Now, with the deed to their house in my name and my future in my own hands, I was finally ready to create a legacy of my own. The first day working at Bluebird Bakery felt like stepping into an alternate universe where time had rewound and given me a second chance. Emma's kitchen was nothing like the formal, austere environment of the Jensen household. Here, flour dusted. Every surface, Laughter punctuated the morning rush, and mistakes were met with shrugs rather than cutting remarks. "You've got a natural touch with pastry," Emma observed as I crimped the edges of my third batch of hand pies. "Where did you learn to bake?" "My mother taught me the basics. After that, I mostly taught myself from books and trial and error." I didn't add that most of my experiments over the years had been critiqued by Vivian's discriminating palate, with more errors noted than successes. "Well, whatever your method, these are perfect." Emma slid the tray into the oven. "The customers are going to love them." A week had passed since my confrontation with Robert. I continued staying at Daniel's apartment, while working part-time at the bakery, a trial arrangement Emma had suggested to see if we were a good fit. In between shifts, I met with Marian Chen to discuss the increasingly complex legal situation. "Robert has filed a counter-petition," Marian informed me during our latest meeting. "He's claiming the property transfers were done with your implicit consent and knowledge." "That's completely false," I said, still shocked by how easily Robert could lie. "I knew nothing about any of it until I found that deed." "I believe you," Marian assured me. "And more importantly, I can prove it. There's not a single document with your signature acknowledging these transfers. No emails, no letters, nothing indicating you were informed." She shuffled through the growing file on her desk. "However, Robert's legal team is formidable. They're arguing that since you benefited from the assets, living in the house, for instance, you tacitly approved the arrangement." Is that argument likely to succeed? Not entirely, but it could complicate matters. Courts generally prefer to see marriages as partnerships where both parties act in good faith. Marian removed her glasses, fixing me with a direct gaze. "Which brings me to an important question. What do you want out of this, Sarah? Are you seeking a divorce or just a renegotiation of your marital and financial arrangement?" The question lingered in my mind throughout my shift at the bakery that afternoon. As I kneaded dough for tomorrow's sourdough loaves, I considered my life with Robert. 37 years of marriage, a son we both loved, countless moments shared, some genuine, others merely performed for the sake of the Jensen family image. But did I love him? Had I ever truly loved him? Or had I been in love with the idea of him, the handsome, confident architect who had chosen me despite his family's reservations? "Penny for your thoughts?" Emma asked, noticing my distraction. "That poor dough might file for abuse if you keep at it like that." I laughed, realizing I had been punching the dough rather forcefully. "Sorry, just working through some personal things." "Man troubles?" she guessed, wiping flour from her hands. "Marriage troubles," I corrected, trying to decide if mine is worth saving. Emma nodded sagely. "Ah, the eternal question. My grandmother had a saying about that. If you have to ask yourself if you should stay, you already know the answer." "It's not that simple," I sighed. "There's history, family, financial entanglements." "Of course it's not simple," Emma agreed. "But at the end of the day, it comes down to one thing. Does being with him make you more yourself or less yourself?" The question hit me with unexpected force. Had being Robert Jensen's wife made me more Sarah or less? The answer was painfully clear. That evening, Daniel and Layla invited me to join them for dinner with Layla's family. I hesitated initially. Meeting new people as just Sarah, rather than Mrs. Robert Jensen, felt strangely exposing. But Daniel's gentle encouragement and my own growing determination to reclaim my life convinced me to accept. The Nazari family home was a modest split level in a middle-class neighborhood, bursting with warmth and activity from the moment we arrived. Layla's mother, Farah, pulled me into a hug as if we were long-lost friends. "Welcome, welcome. Daniel has told us so much about you," she exclaimed, leading me into a kitchen filled with delicious aromas. "Here, taste this and tell me if it needs more salt." Before I could respond, a spoon was at my lips, offering what turned out to be the most flavorful stew I'd ever tasted. Around us, Layla's father and brothers were setting a large table while her sister arranged flowers in mismatched vases. Children darted between the adults, laughing and playing some game involving elaborate hand gestures. "Your home is lovely," I said to Farah, meaning it completely despite how different it was from the Jensen estate's formal perfection. "Pfft, it's a mess," she replied with a dismissive wave. "But it's our mess. A house needs life in it, yes? Otherwise it's just a building with furniture." Her words resonated with me. The Jensen estate, for all its grandeur and careful maintenance, had always felt more like a museum than a home. This place, with its scuffed floors, walls covered in family photos, and the lingering scent of years of home-cooked meals, was undeniably alive. Dinner was served family-style, dishes passed around a table crowded with more people than chairs. The conversation flowed freely, jumping from topic to topic without the rigid structure of Jensen dinner discussions. Most surprising was how everyone spoke directly to me, asking questions about my interests, my opinions, my experiences, rather than talking around me as the Jensens typically did. "Daniel tells us you're working at a bakery now?" Layla's father, Hassan, asked as he refilled my water glass. "That must be a welcome change from managing a large household." "It is," I admitted, "though I'm just learning the ropes. Emma, the owner, has been very patient." "You should bring some of your baking next time," Farah suggested warmly. "I'll trade you recipes. My baklava for your... What's your specialty?" I hesitated, realizing I'd never really thought of myself as having a culinary specialty. In the Jensen household, I cooked what was expected, what was traditional, what wouldn't prompt criticism. "I make a good lemon tart," I offered finally, remembering the one dessert that even Vivian had grudgingly praised. "Perfect. Next Sunday, we trade. Baklava for lemon tart." Farah clapped her hands decisively, as if sealing a contract. "And you must come early so I can show you how to make proper tadig." Just like that, I was included in future plans, expected to return, welcomed into their circle without question or condition. The contrast with my decades-long struggle to be accepted by the Jensens couldn't have been starker. After dinner, as Layla and her sisters cleared the table, Hassan invited me to join him on the back porch. The small yard was aglow with string lights, a stark difference from the meticulously landscaped gardens of the Jensen estate. "Daniel is a good man," Hassan said as we settled into weathered patio chairs. "We are very happy he found our Layla, and now we see where he gets his kindness." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. Though I can't take much credit. Daniel became a good man despite the environment he was raised in, not because of it. Hassan studied me thoughtfully. "You know, when I came to this country 30 years ago, I had nothing but a suitcase and big dreams. My family back home thought I was crazy to leave a secure job as an engineer to start over in America." He gestured to the modest home behind us. "This isn't the mansion they imagined I would have by now, but it's filled with love, with family who choose to be together, not who are obligated to be together. That is true success, yes?" I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "Daniel tells us you are at a crossroads," Hassan continued gently. "Making difficult decisions about your marriage, your future." "I am," I admitted. "It's complicated." "Of course it is. Life is never simple." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "But may I offer one piece of advice? From one immigrant to the child of immigrants?" I nodded again, curious. In my country, there is a saying, "Better to eat dry bread in peace than cake in turmoil." All the wealth, all the status in the world means nothing if you must surrender your soul to keep it. His words echoed in my mind later that night as I lay awake in Daniel's guest room. Dry bread in peace versus cake in turmoil. For 37 years, I had been choking down elaborately decorated cake in an environment of constant criticism and manipulation. The simple bread of an authentic life, even with its potential financial uncertainties, suddenly seemed infinitely more appealing. The next morning, I called Marian Chen. "I've made my decision," I told her. "I want to file for divorce." 2 hours later, I sat in her office as she outlined the process ahead. "Given the complexity of the assets involved and Robert's counterpetition, this won't be quick or easy," she warned me. "The Jensen family will fight to protect their wealth." "I understand," I replied. "But I'm not looking to take everything. I just want what's fairly mine after 37 years of marriage." "Which is substantial," Marian reminded me. "The house alone is worth millions, not to mention your stake in the firm and the investment accounts." "I don't need the house," I said, surprising myself with the realization. It never felt like mine anyway, even after I learned it was in my name. Marian made a note. "That could be a significant bargaining chip, but don't undervalue your contribution to the marriage, Sarah. You managed that household for decades, enabling Robert to build his career. Under equitable distribution principles, you're entitled to a fair share of the marital assets. I know. I just don't want to become like them, defining my worth by possessions and status." "Finding a fair settlement isn't about revenge or greed," Marian said firmly. "It's about justice and securing your future. Don't confuse walking away from emotional abuse with walking away from financial security you helped build." As I left her office, my phone rang, Robert's number flashing on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "This legal nonsense has gone far enough. My parents are suffering. The firm's partners are asking questions. This needs to end." "I agree," I replied, calmly. "That's why I've just instructed my attorney to file for divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. "Divorce?" he finally echoed, disbelief evident in his voice. "After 37 years? Because of a few financial arrangements you didn't understand?" "This isn't about the financial arrangements, Robert. It's about 37 years of being treated as an accessory rather than a partner. It's about discovering that my husband has been systematically lying to me for decades. It's about finally recognizing that I deserve better." "You're being ridiculous," he snapped. "Where will you even go? What will you do? You've never lived alone, never supported yourself." His words were meant to frighten me back into compliance, but instead, they strengthened my resolve. "I'm staying with Daniel for now. I'm working at a bakery, and I'm discovering that I'm entirely capable of building a life without the great Robert Jensen directing my every move." "A bakery?" His laugh was coldly dismissive. "Playing at being a shop girl at your age? Is that what this midlife crisis is about? Some pathetic attempt to recapture your youth?" "No, Robert. It's about reclaiming the future that was taken from me when I married into a family that saw me as nothing more than a convenient household manager with a useful legal name." "You'll regret this," he warned, his voice hardening. "When the reality sets in, when you're living in some tiny apartment, working for minimum wage, with no status, no security, you'll come crawling back." "Goodbye, Robert," I said firmly, ending the call before he could respond. Instead of returning to Daniel's apartment, I drove to a real estate office I'd researched online. The agent, a middle-aged woman named Gloria, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Jensen? I'm Gloria Patterson. How can I help you today?" "Please, call me Sarah," I insisted. "I'm looking for an apartment, something small but comfortable, in a walkable neighborhood. Perhaps near Riverside Drive." Gloria nodded, making notes. "Budget range?" I hesitated, the question highlighting how little I knew about managing my own finances after decades of living on an allowance determined by Robert. "I'm not entirely sure yet. My financial situation is in flux due to a pending divorce, but I'm employed and my attorney assures me I'll have a reasonable settlement." To her credit, Gloria didn't flinch at my unusual circumstances. "I understand. Let's start by looking at a few options in different price points, and you can get a feel for what's available. By the end of the afternoon, I had toured 3 apartments. The first was too reminiscent of the Jensen aesthetic, all stainless steel and cold minimalism. The second felt cramped and dark, but the third, a sun-filled 1-bedroom in a converted textile factory with exposed brick walls and tall windows, immediately felt right. "The building has a shared rooftop garden," Gloria explained as we walked through the space. "The previous tenant planted herbs and flowers in that corner section." I peered out the window at the little garden plot, already imagining the herbs I could grow for my baking. "It's perfect." "The rent is $1,800 per month," Gloria said, watching my reaction carefully. "Plus utilities. Is that within your range?" The amount seemed simultaneously enormous and trivial. Enormous compared to the personal spending allowance Robert had granted me for decades. Trivial compared to the massive assets Marion had informed me were legally mine. Yes, I decided. I can manage that. Wonderful. I'll draw up the application. The landlord will want proof of income and references, of course. My heart sank slightly. My employment is very recent, and I'm not sure what references I can provide, given my circumstances. Gloria considered this. A larger security deposit might help, or perhaps a co-signer. Does your son have established credit? I'd rather not involve Daniel that way, I said quickly, but I may have another option. That evening, I called Marion Chen again. "I need a favor," I explained. "I've found an apartment I want to rent, but I have no rental history, no credit history in my name, and only a part-time job at the moment." "That shouldn't be a problem," Marion assured me. "We can provide financial documentation showing your assets and pending settlement. Most landlords will accept that, especially with a larger security deposit." "Thank you," I said, relieved. "There's one more thing. I'd like to access some of my funds, the ones Robert can't touch due to the protective orders we filed. Is that possible?" "Absolutely. The investment account in your name should be accessible to you. I'll send instructions tomorrow. How much do you need?" I calculated quickly. Rent, security deposit, basic furniture. "Perhaps $15,000 to start?" "I'll make it happen," Marion promised. As I ended the call, I felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. After decades of being financially dependent on Robert, of never making a significant purchase without his approval, I was preparing to rent an apartment and furnish it entirely on my own. The next morning brought another development. I arrived at Bluebird Bakery to find Emma waiting with an unusual expression, part excitement, part hesitation. "I have a proposition for you," she said, pulling me into the empty cafe before opening hours. "I've been thinking about expanding, opening a second location focused more on artisanal breads and special occasion cakes. The space next door is available." She paused, studying my reaction. "What I'm asking is, would you be interested in becoming a partner? Not just an employee, but a partial owner with creative input?" I stared at her, stunned. "Emma, that's incredibly generous, but I've only been working here for a week." "True," she acknowledged with a grin. "But I've been in this business long enough to recognize talent and passion when I see it. You have both in spades. Plus, Daniel mentioned you once dreamed of opening your own bakery." "He told you that?" "He might have mentioned it when he came in for coffee yesterday," Emma admitted. "He also mentioned your situation, that you're starting over after decades of putting everyone else first." I wasn't sure whether to be touched by Daniel's advocacy or embarrassed by his sharing my personal circumstances. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "I have no experience running a business." "But you have lived. Experience in what makes a space welcoming, what makes people feel cared for through food," Emma countered. "The business side can be learned. That innate understanding of nurturing through baking, that's rarer." "I'd need to think about it," I said carefully, "and discuss investment amounts with my attorney." "Of course." Emma handed me a folder. "Here's My business plan and projected numbers. Take your time reviewing it. The opportunity isn't going anywhere. I tucked the folder into my bag, my mind spinning with possibilities. From housewife to bakery partner in the span of 2 weeks? It seemed impossibly fast, recklessly impulsive. Yet as I mixed batters and shaped loaves throughout my shift, the idea took root. Not just employment, but ownership. Not just following others' recipes, but creating my own. Not just working for wages, but building equity in something that could grow and thrive. After work, I visited my prospective apartment. Again, this time with Daniel and Layla. They walked through the space, offering enthusiastic approval and practical suggestions. "The light in here is amazing, Mom," Daniel said, standing by the tall windows. "I can already see you with a reading chair right here." "And the kitchen has good bones," Layla added, opening and closing cabinets. "Small, but efficient. Perfect for one person. Or for someone who spends most of her time baking elsewhere," I said, then told them about Emma's proposal. Daniel's face lit up. "Mom, that's incredible. Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. It seems so sudden, risky." "It is," Layla agreed. "Pragmatically, but also exciting, a chance to build something that's truly yours." As they continued exploring the apartment, suggesting furniture arrangements and color schemes, I stood in the center of the empty living room, imagining this space filled with my possessions. Not the formal antiques of the Jensen household, but items chosen solely by me, for me. My phone buzzed with a text from Marion. "Funds transfer complete. $15,000 now available in your new account. Paperwork ready for landlord. Congratulations on your first independent financial step, Sarah." I looked around the sun-filled apartment, thought about the bakery partnership proposal in my bag, and felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: the giddy, terrifying freedom of unlimited possibility. For 37 years, I had lived within the confines of the Jensen family expectations, my identity subsumed by their needs and standards. Now, with each decision made independently, from renting an apartment to considering a business partnership, I was reclaiming not just my name on a deed, but my entire sense of self. The path ahead was uncertain, the divorce proceedings would likely be contentious, and my new life was still taking shape. But standing in what would soon be my own space, watching my son and his girlfriend plan my future with more enthusiasm than the Jensens had ever shown for my present, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I had made the right choice. Sarah. Collins Jensen was finally coming home to herself. "Mrs. Jensen, please state your name for the record." "Sarah Collins Jensen. And you're aware you're under oath today?" "Yes." The deposition room felt sterile and intimidating. Polished mahogany, table, leather chairs, and recording equipment positioned to capture every word, every facial expression. I sat across from Robert's attorney, Lawrence Pritchard, a man whose tailored suit and cold eyes communicated the Jensen family message clearly. "We have power, we have resources, and we will use both against you." Marion Chen sat beside me, her presence steady and reassuring. We had prepared for this deposition for weeks, reviewing documents, practicing responses, anticipating the strategies Robert's legal team might employ to undermine my claim to assets I legally owned but had never controlled. "Mrs. Jensen," Pritchard began, his voice deceptively cordial, "could you please describe your educational background?" "I completed high school. I took some community college courses in business administration but didn't complete a degree. And your employment history prior to your marriage to Robert Jensen?" "I worked as a sales assistant at Miller's department store for 3 years, and briefly as a baker's assistant at Parkside Bakery." Pritchard nodded, making a show of noting this information. "No professional certifications? No specialized training?" "No." "And during your marriage to Mr. Jensen, did you maintain employment outside the home?" "No. I managed the household, cared for our son, and later, for my husband's aging parents. A homemaker, Pritchard summarized with a subtle emphasis that somehow made the role sound trivial. Now, Mrs. Jensen, when did you first become aware that certain family assets had been placed in your name? 2 months ago, when I discovered the deed to our house while helping my mother-in-law with some papers. And in the 25 years prior to this discovery, you never once inquired about property ownership, investment accounts, or business. Holdings? Marian interjected smoothly. Objection. That question assumes facts not in evidence and mischaracterizes the nature of the Jensen family's financial management. Pritchard smiled thinly. I'll rephrase. Mrs. Jensen, did you ever ask your husband about family finances during your marriage? Yes, of course. I managed the household accounts, paid the bills Robert approved, and followed the budget he established. But you never specifically asked about property titles or investment accounts? When I asked broader financial questions, Robert always said he was handling it, and I shouldn't worry. And you accepted that answer? For 25 years? I felt a flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. Put this way, my compliance sounded like willful ignorance. I trusted my husband, I said simply. That trust was misplaced. Pritchard shifted. Tactics. Mrs. Jensen, would you describe your lifestyle during your marriage as comfortable? Yes. You lived in a historic home in an exclusive neighborhood, correct? Yes. Employed household staff? Drove luxury vehicles? Attended social events with the city's elite? Yes to all of those. And these benefits, this lifestyle, was made possible by your husband's successful career and the Jensen family's multi-generational business acumen, was it not? Marian leaned forward. Objection. Argumentative and assumes facts not in evidence. Mrs. Jensen's labor in the home contributed significantly to enabling her husband's career success. Pritchard waved a dismissive hand. Let me be more direct. Mrs. Jensen, isn't it true that you benefited extensively from the financial arrangements you now claim were made without your knowledge? Before I could answer, Marian interjected again. Objection. The question mischaracterizes the nature of these transactions and implies my client wasn't entitled to marital benefits regardless of how property was titled. The deposition continued, in this vein for hours, Pritchard attempting to portray me as an ungrateful wife who had enjoyed the privileges of wealth without contributing meaningfully to its creation, while Marian steadfastly defended my contributions and rights. By the time we concluded, I felt emotionally drained but oddly validated. For perhaps the first time, my decades of household management, caregiving, and social support were being acknowledged as actual work that had enabled Robert's career and the Jensen family's continued prosperity. You did well, Marian assured me as we gathered our papers. Don't let Pritchard's tactics get to you. This is standard procedure in high-asset divorces. They'll try to make you feel undeserving to pressure you into accepting less than you're entitled to. It's not about deserving, I said quietly. It's about finally having some say in my own life, my own future. Marian squeezed my arm gently. Exactly. Remember that when things get difficult. Outside the law office, Daniel was waiting to drive me to my new apartment. I had signed the lease 2 weeks earlier, and today was moving day, though moving was perhaps too grand a term for transferring the few possessions I had claimed from my former life to my new space. How'd it go? He asked as I slid into the passenger seat. About as expected. Your father's attorney tried to make me feel like an incompetent gold digger. Marian defended me brilliantly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Dad's really going all in on this scorched earth approach, isn't he? He doesn't know any other way to handle conflict, I said. The Jensens never learned how to lose gracefully. We drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When we arrived at my new building, Layla was already there, directing 2 delivery men who were unloading furniture I had ordered online. A simple bed frame, a comfortable sofa, a small dining table with 2 chairs. Sarah, she called out, waving enthusiastically. "What do you think? The sofa just arrived, and it's even better than it looked in the photos." The furnishing of my new apartment had become a joint project over the past 2 weeks. Layla had introduced me to online home good sites I never knew existed, while Daniel had handled the practical details of delivery schedules and assembly requirements. The result was coming together into a space that felt entirely mine. Comfortable without being fussy, attractive without being showy, warm without the oppressive formality of the Jensen estate. As we guided the delivery men up the freight elevator, I felt a curious lightness. Each piece of furniture represented a choice I had made for myself, without consideration for anyone else's preferences or judgments. "Where do you want the bed, Mrs. Jensen?" one of the delivery men asked as they maneuvered the frame through the apartment door. "Please call me Sarah," I replied automatically, then paused, struck by the significance of the correction. For decades, I had been Mrs. Jensen, an identity so tied to my husband and his family that my own name had almost disappeared. And, "By the window, please. I want to see the sunrise." Once the delivery men had departed, the three of us continued arranging the apartment. Daniel assembled the bed frame while Layla and I unpacked kitchen essentials and arranged books on the single bookshelf, a collection that was small but entirely reflective of my interests. Not decorative volumes selected to impress visitors. I can't believe how quickly this is coming together, Layla remarked as she arranged a trio of small potted herbs on the kitchen windowsill, a housewarming gift from her mother. "It already feels like home." Home. The word resonated differently. Now, for 37 years, I had lived in a house that was legally mine, but had never felt like it belonged to me. This small apartment, with its imperfect corners and personal touches, already felt more genuinely mine than the grand Jensen estate ever had. As evening approached, Daniel ordered takeout from a nearby Thai restaurant, another small freedom, selecting food based solely on what I enjoyed, rather than what would meet Harold and Vivian's rigid culinary expectations. We ate at my new table, using mismatched dishes I had found at a secondhand store, drinking wine from simple glasses rather than the crystal stemware I had polished weekly for decades. "To new beginnings," Daniel proposed, raising his glass. "And to family," Layla added. "The kind we choose, not just the kind we're born or married into." I touched my glass to theirs, feeling a surge of gratitude for these two young people who had supported my transformation without judgment or reservation. After dinner, as we arranged the last few items, my phone rang. Emma from the bakery. "Sarah, have you made a decision about the partnership? The landlord for the space next door is pressing me for an answer by the end of the week." I glanced at Daniel, who had heard Emma's voice through the phone and was giving me an encouraging thumbs up. "I'm still considering it," I replied carefully. "It's a significant decision." "Of course, no pressure," Emma assured me. "But if it helps, I've been experimenting with that lemon curd technique you suggested, and it's revolutionary. The customers are raving. Your instincts for this business are spot on." After we hung up, Daniel looked at me quizzically. "What's holding you back, Mom? The bakery partnership seems perfect for you." I sank onto my new sofa, trying to articulate the mixture of excitement and fear I felt whenever I considered Emma's offer. "It's a big financial commitment," I began. "And while Marion assures me I'll receive a fair settlement, the divorce proceedings could drag on for months." "But that's not really it, is it?" Daniel pressed gently. I shook my head. "No. I think I'm afraid of wanting something too much. For so long, I trained myself not to want things for myself, not to dream too big or hope too earnestly. It was easier that way, less disappointing." Layla sat beside me, her expression thoughtful. "My grandmother says that when you've been hungry a long time, sometimes you're afraid to eat a full meal because your stomach has shrunk. But you have to eat anyway, a little at a time, until your body remembers how to be nourished." The analogy was so apt, it brought tears to my eyes. My capacity for hope, for ambition, for self-advocacy had indeed shrunk through decades of neglect. Now, faced with opportunities I had once only dreamed of, I was afraid to embrace them fully. "When do you need to give Emma an answer?" Daniel asked. "By the end of the week. The adjacent space won't stay available for long." "Then you have a few days to get used to the idea," he said encouragingly. "To let your stomach expand a little." Later, that night, after Daniel and Layla had gone, I stood alone in my new apartment, absorbing the silence, the solitude, the sense of possibility that permeated the space. Through the tall windows, the city lights twinkled like stars. A view entirely different from the manicured gardens of the Jensen estate, but beautiful in its own urban way. My phone chimed with a text message from Robert. "The house feels empty. Without you. Your garden is suffering. The staff don't know how to maintain things properly. When will you come to your senses and come home?" The message was so typically Robert. No acknowledgement of my feelings or needs, just a reminder of how my absence inconvenienced him, followed by the assumption that I would eventually return to my proper place. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and revisited Emma's business proposal, reviewing the numbers with newly focused attention. The financial projections were modest but sound. The creative possibilities were endless. The opportunity to build something meaningful, something entirely my own, was unprecedented in my life. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent Emma a text. "I'm in. Let's meet tomorrow to discuss details." Her response came immediately. "Yes! Champagne in the morning. And by champagne, I mean really good coffee because we have to work. So excited, partner." Partner. The word carried a weight and dignity I had never experienced in my marriage, where partnership had been a facade concealing a deeply unequal power dynamic. The next morning, I woke in my own bed, in my own apartment, to sunlight streaming through windows without the heavy drapes Vivian had insisted upon. I made coffee in my small kitchen, using beans I had selected because I enjoyed their flavor, not because they were what the Jensens had always served. I dressed in clothes chosen for comfort and personal preference rather than to meet Vivian's standards of appropriate attire for a Jensen wife. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror seemed both familiar and new, my face, my eyes, but with an expression of anticipation rather than resignation. As I prepared to leave for my meeting with Emma, my phone rang again. Marion Chen. "Sarah, I've just received a settlement offer from Robert's team," she said without preamble. "It's interesting." "What are they proposing?" "They're offering to let you keep the main property and $1 million from the investment accounts, plus a small monthly stipend. In exchange, you would relinquish all claims to the family home, your ownership stake in the firm, and the remaining investment accounts." I did the mental calculation quickly. "So they want me to give up approximately $7 million in assets in exchange for about $2 million? "That's correct. They're hoping your lack of financial experience will make the $1 million figure sound impressive enough that you won't recognize how inadequate it is compared to what you're legally entitled to. What do you recommend?" "I recommend we counter with something closer to an equal division of marital assets. Perhaps you relinquish your claim on the Jensen family home in exchange for full ownership of the main property, half the investment, accounts, and a buyout of your ownership stake in the firm." "That sounds fair," I agreed. "Though I'm surprised they're offering anything at all. I expected Robert to fight me on every detail." "This offer likely came from their financial advisors, not from Robert directly," Marion explained. "From a business perspective, a reasonable settlement is far less costly than a protracted legal battle that airs the family's financial manipulations in public court. Will Robert see it that way?" "That's the $1 million question," Marion replied with a small laugh. "Literally, in this case. I'll prepare our counteroffer today." After hanging up, I texted Daniel to share the update. His response was immediate. "Don't let them lowball you, Mom. You deserve half of everything. More, considering what you put up with for 37 years. His support warmed me as I headed to Bluebird Bakery for my meeting with Emma. The morning was bright, the air crisp with early autumn sharpness. I walked the few blocks from my apartment to the bakery, another small freedom I was learning to appreciate, the ability to move through the world on my own schedule, at my own pace. Emma was waiting with blueprints spread across a table in the empty cafe. "Partner," she called out cheerfully, "come see the preliminary designs for Bluebird East." For the next 2 hours, we discussed layouts, equipment needs, menu concepts, and financial projections. Emma had already secured preliminary approval from the bank for a business expansion loan, which would cover 70% of the startup costs. My investment would cover the remainder. "We'll need to formalize our partnership agreement," Emma explained. "My attorney can draft something, or we can work with yours if you prefer." "Let's have Marian review it," I decided. "She's handling all my legal matters now, and she's very thorough." "Perfect." Emma rolled up the blueprints. "Now, about the name. I was thinking Bluebird East keeps the brand consistency, but I'm open to other ideas." I hesitated, then offered the suggestion that had been forming in my mind. "What about Sarah's at Bluebird? It maintains the connection to your established brand but gives the new location its own identity." Emma's face lit up. "Sarah's at Bluebird. I love it. It's perfect, personal, welcoming, distinct while still connected." She studied me for a moment. "You know, when you first started working here, you seemed almost afraid to make suggestions or express preferences. Now you're naming a bakery after yourself. That's quite an evolution in just a few weeks." Her observation startled me. Had I changed that much? That quickly? Or was I simply allowing my true self to emerge after decades of careful suppression? "I'm reclaiming pieces of myself," I explained. "Remembering who I was before I became Mrs. Robert Jensen." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I like Sarah Collins Jensen very much. She makes exceptional pastry and has excellent business instincts." As we continued our planning session, I felt a growing excitement that was both familiar and new. The resurrection of dreams I had abandoned decades ago, now transformed by experience and hardship into something more grounded, more resilient. By the time I left the bakery, preliminary partnership agreement in hand, the afternoon was fading into early evening. Rather than returning directly to my apartment, I took a detour through a small neighborhood park, finding an empty bench where I could sit and absorb the day's developments. My phone chimed with a text from Marian. "Counter offer delivered. Robert's team says they'll respond within 48 hours. Another text followed. This one from Layla. "Mom just pulled the baklava from the oven. She says to remind you about Sunday's dessert exchange. No pressure, but there may be a cousin visiting. From Lebanon who's single and owns a bookstore." I smiled at Layla's gentle matchmaking. The idea of dating again after 37 years of marriage hadn't even crossed my mind. Yet the casual mention didn't provoke anxiety as it might have even a few weeks ago. Instead, it registered as simply another possibility in a life suddenly rich with options. As dusk settled over the park, I watched families gathering children, couples walking hand in hand, solitary individuals like myself enjoying the peaceful transition from day to evening. All of us moving through the world according to our own rhythms, our own choices. My phone rang once more. Robert again. This time I decided to answer. "Yes?" "Sarah." His voice sounded strained, less commanding than usual. "I just received the counteroffer from your attorney. It's completely unreasonable." "It's equitable, Robert. Half of what we built together." "What? We built?" He couldn't quite hide his incredulity. "I built the business. I maintained the family legacy. You kept house." The dismissive characterization of my life's work would have wounded me deeply just months ago. Now it merely confirmed what I already knew about how Robert valued, or rather failed to value my contributions to our marriage. If that's how you see it, perhaps we should let the courts decide what's fair, I replied calmly. I'm sure they'll be interested in how you transferred millions in assets to my name without my knowledge or consent, then maintained control of those assets for decades. His silence spoke volumes. Finally, he sighed heavily. What do you want, Sarah? Really? The question caught me off guard. In all our years together, Robert had rarely asked what I wanted. Not about important matters, not with any genuine interest. In my answer, I want what's rightfully mine, I said after a moment. Not out of greed or vengeance, but because I earned it through 37 years of supporting you, caring for your parents, and maintaining your household while you built your career. And if I agree to your terms, what then? Will you come? Home. The word home hung between us, its meaning transformed. The Jensen estate had never truly been my home, despite the deed in my name. My new apartment, small and still sparsely furnished, already felt more genuinely mine. No, Robert, I'm not coming back. That chapter of my life is closed. Because of some financial arrangements you didn't understand? His voice held a note of genuine confusion. We could have worked through that. You didn't need to blow up our entire marriage. The financial deception was just the catalyst, Robert. The real issues run much deeper, decades deeper. I was never a true partner in our marriage, never valued for anything beyond the services I provided to you and your family. That's not true, he protested weakly. I loved you. I still love you. Perhaps you do, in your way, I acknowledged. But you never respected me. There's no love without respect, Robert. As the words left my lips, I recognized their truth. Whatever Robert felt for me, it had never included the fundamental respect that would have prevented him from deceiving me for decades, from making unilateral decisions about our shared life, from treating me as an accessory rather than an equal. Have to go, I said, ending the call before he could respond. The park had grown darker, the evening chill more pronounced. Yet, as I walked back to my apartment, I felt a warmth spreading through me. The warmth of conviction, of self-respect, of boundaries firmly established and maintained. 2 months ago, I had been Sarah Jensen, the invisible wife who cleaned up, after her in-laws and never questioned her place in the household hierarchy. Today, I was becoming Sarah Collins Jensen, soon-to-be bakery owner, independent woman, author of her own life story. The path ahead still held challenges. Finalizing the divorce, launching the new bakery location, learning to navigate a world I had been insulated from for decades. But for the first time in 37 years, that path was mine to choose, mine to walk at my own pace, toward a horizon limited only by my own imagination rather than by someone else's expectations. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, I smiled at the simple pleasure of entering a space that reflected my personality, my preferences, my essence. The deed I had discovered 2 months ago had listed me as the owner of a house that had never truly been mine. Now, in this modest apartment filled with items I had chosen, in this new life I was building choice by choice, I had finally come into my rightful inheritance, not of property or money, but of my own authentic self. 1 year later, I stood in the center of Sarah's at Bluebird, surveying the morning rush with quiet pride. The aroma of fresh bread filled the air, mingling with the rich scent of brewing coffee and the sweet perfume of pastries emerging from the ovens. At the counter, 2 young baristas managed the line of customers with cheerful efficiency, while, in the open kitchen, bakers shaped dough and decorated cakes in full view of appreciative onlookers. "The anniversary special is selling out," Emma remarked, appearing beside me with clipboard in hand. "We might need to make another batch of those lemon lavender scones." "I'll get started on them," I offered, already reaching for my apron. "The dough is already proofing in the walk-in." A year of partnership with Emma had taught me more than just business management. I had discovered a capacity for decision-making, for creative problem-solving, for leadership that had lain dormant during my decades as Mrs. Robert Jensen. The bakery had flourished under our joint stewardship, exceeding even Emma's optimistic projections. "Don't forget we have that interview at 2, Emma reminded me. "Local Business Quarterly wants photos of both of us for their Women Entrepreneurs feature." I nodded, still slightly bemused by the attention our success had attracted. Last month, the city's major newspaper had run a profile calling me a late-blooming business maven who proves it's never too late to reinvent yourself. The article had prompted a flood of messages from women in similar situations, long married, deeply unhappy, afraid to start over. I responded to each one personally, sharing what I had learned during my own journey to independence. Some merely needed encouragement. Others sought practical advice about financial separation or career opportunities for women with decades-long gaps in their employment history. I found myself becoming an unexpected mentor to women traversing the same difficult terrain I had navigated a year earlier. As I shaped scones with practiced hands, I thought about how much had changed since that fateful day when I discovered the deed in my name. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, with terms that largely reflected my counteroffer: the main property, half the investment accounts, and a buyout of my ownership stake in Jensen Architecture. Robert had fought the settlement initially, vacillating between angry threats and maudlin appeals to our shared history. In the end, pragmatism prevailed. His attorneys convinced him that a protracted legal battle would only damage the firm's reputation and deplete the very assets he was trying to protect. Harold Jensen had not lived to see the divorce finalized. He passed away 4 months into the proceedings, his final days spent in a hospice facility with professional care far superior to what I could have provided. I attended the funeral, standing at a respectful distance as the Jensen family performed their public grief with appropriate dignity. Robert had seemed genuinely moved when I approached him after the service to offer condolences. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the man I had once loved. Vulnerable, human, stripped of the Jensen family armor he usually wore. "He respected you, you know," Robert said quietly. "In his way." "And I respected him," I replied, meaning it. Harold Jensen had been a difficult, demanding man, but he had also built something substantial, something that had provided for his family for generations, even if that provision had come with invisible strings attached. Vivian, by contrast, had never softened toward me. After Harold's death, she moved to a luxury retirement community where, according to Daniel, she maintained the Jensen family mythology with undiminished fervor. In her narrative, I was the ungrateful wife who had abandoned my responsibilities and broken her son's heart, a version of events that bore little resemblance to reality, but provided her the comfort of familiar grievances. Finished shaping the scones and slid them into the oven just as the bell above the bakery door chimed, announcing a new customer. Looking up, I was surprised to see Patricia Winters, Robert's former executive assistant, standing at the counter. "Mrs. Jensen," she greeted me as I approached. "Or do you prefer Ms. Collins now?" "Sarah is fine," I replied, genuinely pleased to see her. "What brings you to our neighborhood?" "I had a meeting nearby and remembered Daniel mentioning your bakery." She glanced around appreciatively. "It's lovely. So warm and inviting." "Thank you. Would you like some coffee?" "On the house." Over coffee and fresh scones, Patricia shared news of Jensen Architecture. After my departure and subsequent divorce, the firm had undergone significant changes. Robert had stepped back from day-to-day operations, ostensibly to focus on creative direction, but in reality, according to Patricia, because the partners had lost confidence in his leadership. "The financial maneuvering your divorce uncovered made a lot of people nervous," she explained. "Several key clients asked pointed questions about the firm's stability and ethics." I never intended to damage the business, I said truthfully. I just wanted what was rightfully mine. Patricia nodded. And you deserved it. But it forced some necessary changes. The firm is actually healthier now, more transparent, more collaborative. She hesitated, then added, Robert hasn't adjusted well, though. He seems lost. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, a twinge of sympathy for the man I had once loved, satisfaction that the firm's problematic practices had been addressed, regret that it had required such a painful rupture. And you? I asked. How are you doing? Patricia's expression brightened. Actually, that's part of why I wanted to stop by. I've been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, the first woman in the firm's history to hold an executive position. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely happy for her. Congratulations. Thank you. And I owe you some gratitude as well. Your situation, it made me look at my own professional boundaries differently, made me realize I deserved more recognition, more authority. She smiled ruefully. Watching you stand up for yourself gave me courage to do the same. After Patricia left, I returned to the kitchen, reflecting on the unpredictable ripple effects of my decisions. When I had first confronted Robert about the deed, I had been thinking only of my own dignity, my own rights. I never imagined that my personal stand might inspire others to reassess their own circumstances. The afternoon passed in a pleasant blur of baking, customer interactions, and the interview with local business quarterly. The photographer captured Emma and me in our element, flower-dusted, laughing, surrounded by the fruits of our labor and creativity. As closing time approached, Daniel arrived with Layla and her parents, Farah and Hassan. They had become regular visitors to the bakery, with Farah and I maintaining a friendly culinary rivalry that had enriched both our repertoires. We come bearing news, Daniel announced as they settled at a corner table with coffee and the day's remaining pastries. He took Layla's hand, both of them practically glowing with excitement. We're engaged! Joyful congratulations erupted around the table. Farah dabbed at her eyes while Hassan clapped Daniel firmly on the shoulder. I embraced them both, my heart full. And we have something to ask you, Layla said, turning to me. Would you and my mother collaborate on the wedding cake? Something that represents both our families, both our traditions? The request touched me deeply. I would be honored, I said, already envisioning a creation that would blend Farah's expertise in Middle Eastern sweets with my newfound confidence in European-style pastry. As we closed the bakery and I prepared to walk the short distance to my apartment, now fully furnished and truly feeling like home, I reflected on the journey of the past year, from the shock of discovering the deed to the challenges of the divorce, from learning to live alone to building a thriving business partnership. Each step had brought me closer to the woman I was always meant to be. That evening, seated on my small balcony with a glass of wine, I opened an email that had arrived earlier in the day, an invitation to speak at a women's business conference about second acts, reinventing yourself after 60. The organizer had read the newspaper profile and thought my story might inspire others considering similar transitions. As I contemplated accepting, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Sarah Jensen? A woman's voice inquired when I answered. Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Eleanor Phillips. You don't know me, but I read about you in the paper last month. She paused, seeming to gather courage. I'm in a situation similar to what yours was. Married 42 years, always did everything my husband and his family expected. Recently discovered some financial irregularities. I'm so sorry, Eleanor, I said gently. That's a difficult position to be in. I've been thinking about leaving, she continued, her voice strengthening slightly, starting over, like you did. But I'm scared. I'm 67. Is it really possible to build a new life at my age? I looked out at the city lights, at the small but flourishing herb garden on my balcony, at the notebook beside me filled with ideas for seasonal specials at the bakery. Yes, Eleanor, I answered with absolute conviction. It's not just possible, it's wonderful, challenging, sometimes terrifying, but wonderful. We talked for nearly an hour, this stranger and I, connected by shared experience and the universal desire for dignity, for purpose, for self-determination. By the time we hung up, Eleanor had the name of a good attorney and a promise from me to meet for coffee the following week. I returned to the conference invitation and clicked accept, feeling a sense of rightness, of coming full circle. A year ago, I had been a woman who discovered that the house she cleaned didn't just contain her name on a deed, it contained the seeds of her liberation. Now, I could help others find their own paths to freedom. The night was mild, the spring air fragrant with blooming trees and possibility. From my balcony, I could just glimpse the lights of Sarah's at Bluebird, a beacon of my new identity. In the distance lay the neighborhood where the Jensen estate stood, a place that had confined me for decades but ultimately set me free through the very document meant to exploit me. I raised my glass in a silent toast, to Eleanor and women like her, to Daniel and Layla's future, to Emma and our partnership, and most importantly, to myself. Not Sarah Jensen, the invisible wife, but Sarah Collins Jensen, the woman who had found her voice, her purpose, and her home within herself. For 37 years, I had spent my life cleaning after my in-laws, maintaining their home, upholding their standards, preserving their dignity. Then, I found the deed in my name, and with it, the key to my own life. A life that, even beginning, in its 7th decade, stretched before me with a brightness and promise I had never dared to imagine. It wasn't too late. It's never too late.